All right, everyone. Well, we're going to call to order the City of Santa Barbara Fire and Police Commission special meeting for April 22nd, 2021. So, Carol, would you like to please call to order or do a roll call, please?
Sure, Chair Stedman. Chair Stedman, excuse me.
Here.
Vice Chair Rodriguez.
Here.
Commissioner Allman.
Here.
Commissioner Peck. Appears absent. And Commissioner Travis Teague is also not present, although we were informed that she will arrive late.
Right, exactly. So we'll
Thank
expect her to walk on. Thanks,
Yeah.
Carol.
Thank
All right. Let's move on to item number 3, changes to the agenda. Are there any from our commissioners? All right, very well. Let's move on to item number 4, approval of the minutes of March 25th, 2021. Do we have a motion for approval?
I move to approve the minutes.
Is there a second? I'll second the motion. All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 All right, we're moving briskly along here. Carol, do we have any hands raised for public comment?
We do have a hand raise. Ms. Scott, I will unmute you and you'll have 2 minutes to speak. Oh, you are self-muted. Ms. Scott?
Hello, can you hear me?
There you are.
Near you.
Oh, thank God. Commissioners, I apologize for the technical difficulties, even though I'm fairly confident for some reason I was not able to unmute myself. Maybe there's something wrong with the app, I'm not quite sure. But in any event, here I am. I wanted to just follow up with you regarding my request a few months ago regarding an alcohol as well as homeless, accounting from the police department. I was unable to navigate through the reports today because I'm away from my computer and I'm using my phone. So I don't know if that is an item that you all are going to be receiving any information on. If you are not, I would ask you again to please ask the police department to itemize the amount of money that they have actually spent in terms of calls for service and reports, for any alcohol related or homeless related calls. They both need to be differentiated. We have an alcohol ordinance that's going to be at the Planning Commission and City Council in May, and we really do need to make sure that the businesses that have alcohol licenses, be it on-site or off-site sales, they need to pitch in and help fund the police services that we provide. And it is into the millions of dollars. I've been told that it's approximately 30% of the budget. And that's a lot of money that could be spent elsewhere if we could recoup any portion of that. Lastly, I did ask you some time ago about putting in a phone line so that people that don't have a computer can listen in and also make public comments. The MTD has such a service with their meetings, and the City of Santa Barbara has no board or commission that allows people that do not have a computer and are able to use GoToWebinar to call in and make a public comment. And it is really, it's a disservice for the vast majority of our residents. Thank you very much and have a great day.
Thank you. Are there any other hands raised, Carol?
No other hands raised.
All righty. Okay, let's move on to item number 6, subcommittee reports. We don't have any subcommittees, so we're going to move directly on to item number 7, which is the police department's budget presentation and department update. And let me just start out by apologizing, Chief, for cutting you off last month at the tail end of the meeting. So hopefully you'll make up for that right now, right?
I will try to be thorough and demonstrate brevity at the same time. So we shall see how I do this. Thank you, thank you, Chair Stedman, and thank you, commissioners, for the opportunity today to talk with you about the proposed budget for the upcoming fiscal year. I'm joined by Captain Mary Linda Arroyo and Lori Peterson, our business manager, and each of them will have a section of this presentation today. Given the description of the budget at the end, if you remind me, I will address the public comment request because I think it does fit into this budget presentation. But as I start out today, what we're going to share with the commission is the overall organizational structure of the department, which I think you will come to realize is actually fairly lean, and certainly, especially compared to years past. We're going to do a presentation on the proposed 2022 budget, including our revenues and expenditures, and then we will talk about the reductions and service level impacts from COVID and from this year's current budget. Next slide, please.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, Chief Malakian. I hadn't given control to Lori yet. I'm going to do that right now. I'm sorry. Okay, Lori, it's all yours. Should be. There we go.
And next slide. Thanks, Lori. So this is a very high level representation of the department's structure. There are 2 divisions, as we will talk about later. There up until last December, there were 3 divisions, each headed by a captain. With the retirement of Captain Altavia at the end of December, the organization was consolidated into 2 divisions under Captain Arroyo and Captain Stoney. So you can see we have 210 full-time employees, of which 142 are sworn officers. We'll talk a little bit later about the impact of this structure. Next slide. The 2 divisions are field operations, which is essentially patrol and traffic enforcement. And then the strategic operation division was really a simpler way to word it would be everything else that isn't in patrol or traffic function. It includes detectives. It includes our administrative personnel operations, including records, and it includes all of the internal operation function. Field operations and the bulk of any department's expenses are really in its personnel. When we talk about savings or adjustments or reductions or whatever word we want to use, we're really talking about shrinking the number of personnel. And as you can see, field operations, the patrol function takes up about 2/3 of the department's budget. Next slide. In the upcoming year, we were in terms of listing what our highlights will be, and quite honestly, I realized in looking at this, I left one off because I'm very optimistic that one of the highlights will be the hiring of a permanent police chief, at least sometime before the fiscal year is concluded, but hopefully well before that. But in addition to that, particularly as we come out of the COVID lockdown and start to open things up, the issues around State Street, both in terms of traffic and the fact that the city council made a decision to keep State Street closed at least until March of next year, which will present some issues in its own right. We think there's going to be some impacts in terms of to an earlier comment. We think the fact that the parklets will be there, but the inside capacity will be expanded, will actually present some unique challenges. And we'll be expanding our bike and motorcycle presence in that area, as well as using both sworn officers and volunteers for increased foot patrol. It goes without saying, not just on State Street, but across the entire city, that we are working with other city departments to help address the homeless issues and the things that come with it. The city made a strategic decision sometime before my arrival that where possible, the primary point of the initial response contact to dealing with a lot of these homeless issues was switched to environmental services, and the police department became kind of a secondary response. I strongly support that effort, but would point out that a great many of the activities related to homelessness still require a police presence. And we have worked very closely, as we saw in last month's commission presentation, with SB Act and CityNet and other groups, as well as our co-response effort, which is a partnership between the police department and county behavioral wellness. We think that partnership is going to bear great fruit. Youth violence reduction and the impact of partnering with community organizations to find alternative activities for youth. And as I said at the city council meeting on Tuesday, part of our job is to make arrests, but I think we all are arriving at a place where a bigger part of our job is to make those arrests unnecessary. And that focus will continue in the year ahead. Co-response, I mentioned previously, it really belongs with, in part with the homeless response effort, but the broader issue of mental health and restorative policing, which is trying to put people in touch with alternative services and to continue to find ways to divert people out of the criminal justice system and out of jail. The challenge in that remains, and it's much bigger than the police department, it's much bigger than the city and the county. But the primary question when you talk about diversion is diversion to where? And that will continue to be a part of our ongoing discussion with the county. We're also moving forward with the deemed approved ordinance. We are going, as I think I've mentioned before, but we were going to go on May 13th or May 20th, I believe. We're now going on May 13th, if I'm not mistaken, to the planning commission. And it seems like a good place to address the issue that was raised earlier. There is no, it's a little bit of a misstatement to say that the department budgets, how much do we budget for alcohol enforcement? How much do we budget for homeless enforcement? The reality is that calls related to these two areas do take up an enormous amount of our time, particularly in the daytime hours. And we could certainly work to look at the calls, look at the time spent, and come up with a dollar amount. But it isn't an amount that's budgeted. It's the amount that our patrol resources spent, but the patrol resources is a fixed cost. With regards to identifying the deemed approved ordinances, if you're not aware, it will apply solely to off-sale premises. That is those premises where people are buying, not opening, not consuming inside at the location, but they're leaving. We are doing, as part of our analysis, we did a heat map, what's called a heat map process in terms of looking at calls for service in the area of off-sale premise. The challenge in that is that we've come to believe, in looking at it since I came, that may not be an accurate way to assign responsibility to the individual business. Because, for example, if a business is across the street from a park, And there are issues related to alcohol or homelessness in that park. It may or may not be a causal factor from the fact that that outlet is across the street. And so we need to do a more thorough analysis, and we're going to restructure not restructure, but we're going to look at how we do those calls for service specifically to that business, as well as some follow-up with people to say, okay, where did you get this alcohol? For the purpose of the Planning Commission, we are going to show the heat maps, but we're also going to make the public statement that we don't think that this is, it's an indicator, but it is not the most accurate way to do this. And then lastly is the animal control ordinance. This has been an item of discussion and concern to the council and to the city manager. And that ordinance is in the process of being redrafted. It's currently with the city attorney at this point. So those are our departmental highlights. I'll stop here before I turn it over to Lori to actually walk you through the specifics of the budget and see if any of the commissioners have questions for me.
Vice Chairman?
Thank you. Before we go into the presentation, I'm wondering if this will be answered in the presentation, but I'm being mindful of the requests and demands over the summer about diverting some funds from police services to community or civil services. So I'm wondering if any of that may be answered or addressed in the budget presentation today.
It won't, but I'm happy to put it on. Bringing the budget forward that was worked out with City Council. Obviously, there may be discussions about that. I think one of the without sort of turning this presentation in a completely different direction, as I mentioned, it really is about personnel, and one of the things that I think don't get thought about is that the police department, especially the Santa Barbara Police Department, is incredibly responsive to community and neighborhood requests for services. And I'm not talking about just crime reduction, but a whole variety of things. A presence of officers after school for a couple of hours, for example, we made a pretty big deal out of the fact that the time that we take to try to resolve situations as peacefully as possible. If the council ultimately makes a decision that they want to reduce the department's budget, that's a council decision. But that does mean that there are things, some of which are on this highlight list, that means we won't do that. We won't have the resources to do that. And the question, I think, is what role, and this is, I think, the question that society is debating is what role do we want the police department to play in terms of maintaining quality of life. I am a little concerned, and I've been in this business for 48 years. Somebody asked me today how long I'd been doing this, and I almost didn't like saying 48 years. It was a little shocking to me to realize I'd been doing it. But a lot of the things that police do in society and in neighborhoods were really an outgrowth of community policing efforts over the last 20 or 25 years. And while I agree that there are areas in which and I mentioned one of them, the city's decision about switching sort of this initial point of contact with homeless people to environmental services, I do have some concern that we not go back to where we were in the 70s and 80s, where the sole mission of the police department was to respond to crimes in progress and to deal solely with enforcement. And that's a longer discussion that I'm happy to have at any time, but I probably took longer than you wanted to answer your question, but it's not a direct presentation here. This is the budget that we're proposing and that the city accepted. And obviously the council and the public will then weigh in about whether it's acceptable or not.
Thank you, Chief Malecki. And I think maybe perhaps at the beginning of the budget presentation to the council, perhaps saying what you just did. Just mentioning, I heard a quote that you said, I think during the youth service presentation last Tuesday, where you said that a big focus is on prevention versus like arrests. So even something like that would help the community feel that the police department is hearing their demands and requests. Focusing on showing how some of these highlights, the homeless response, encouraging services and housing versus arrests is addressing community concerns. Co-response is addressing community concerns. So maybe adding part of that at the beginning of the presentation so that community does feel heard.
Thank you. I appreciate the suggestion, and we will do that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the chief? Okay.
With that, I'll turn it over to Lori Peterson, our business manager, who will walk you through the specifics of the budget. Thank you.
I think you're muted, Lori. Can someone let Ms. Peterson know she's muted? I love the sign language.
I'll walk down the hall and tell her.
Right. Exactly.
Okay, am I the only one that can't hear her?
No, we
I
all
can't
can't
hear-
hear her.
Yeah, I can't hear.
I'm wondering, could maybe she move to Chief Maleckian's office to do the presentation?
I'll bring her to my office. Hold on just a minute.
I'm sure the police can figure out a solution.
I'm hoping the audio, there we go. Let me try this. Probably going to be not the best quality, sorry. So let's try again. Is everybody else hearing an echo?
Yeah, a little bit. Are you on the phone?
Yeah. And I've muted the presentation. Let me try this. No, I don't want to hold on to the phone. Is this better? Okay.
It's better.
Sorry, it'll be awkward, but I'll do my best.
All right. Perfect.
So the budget is before you today, and this represents the FY22 budget that we're looking at, and the total budget for the department for the coming year is proposed to be $46,378,282. So almost $46.4 million. And that budget's made up of basically three larger fund sources, with, of course, the general fund being the largest value in that piece of the pie. We also bring in some of our own departmental revenue, and then we've got identified the grants and SLESF fund, which provides some additional revenue, just under $500,000. And then we have some regional data sharing that's a very small piece of the pie, but comes in as revenue for us. So for the specifics, this is just a visual kind of where our revenues for the department itself. So the departmental revenues of 4.8 million. This is where those pieces come into play. The largest portion being taxes, fees, and fines, which includes the parking citation revenue. And then the next chunk of the pie is the service charges, just under $750,000 there, and then some other smaller things where we have some internal transfers that show up and kind of come from state funds that then get transferred into the department. And then we have an allocation from the general fund specifically for the mobile data computer replacements. And that will be one of the projects I will discuss in just a minute. So those are the major pieces of the revenue for the department. And here's just a visual kind of showing what 2021 budget, the amended budget, ended up looking like, and then the change going forward with FY22 recommended budget. So you can see the differences here. We've got a slight downturn in taxes, fees, and fines, and that's mostly because of the impact of COVID on citation issuance this last year. That will potentially affect us going forward as those tickets that weren't issued won't go late. So it's kind of just being realistic that we'll probably see a small decrease there as well. Intergovernmental, federal, and state funds, those are the traffic grants, and so we don't include those in our initial budget submittal because we're not guaranteed that each year we will get them. And so when we do get a grant, it goes before council to be accepted, and then that's why you can see this kind of this fluctuation that goes across the board. Service charges, again, are things that citizens are paying for fees and services that the department provides, things like live scan fingerprinting, false alarms, vehicle releases, special events, and live scan. So that's the general revenue structure. On the expenditure side, as the chief mentioned, the majority of our budget is on salaries and benefits, and that's what you can clearly see here, with supplies and services being the next chunk of the pie at about 2.6, almost $2.7 million. And then that's also followed closely behind the allocated costs, which are citywide costs that are distributed across to each department. We have no capital to include in this piece of the pie, as the new department or the new building is our capital, and that is run through Public Works. So we have no additional capital requests as part of this budget. Here are our proposed expenditures for FY22 in comparison to 21. This lighter column, which is labeled departmental savings, this is the anticipated savings that we're going to be shooting for going forward in order to meet our budget target. And you can see in that category, the largest savings that we're anticipating or shooting for is in the salaries and benefits area. And then the next area where we had some savings that we could find potentially was in the supplies and services. So our total projected departmental savings towards this budget is just under $2 million at this point. the captain will be covering the impacts of these things, but in salaries and benefits, I'll just put the positions out there that we're looking at. We're looking at holding open 4 officer positions, 2 sergeant positions. We have no hourly staff at this point and have no plans to hire any. We're holding a captain position for a whole year. And then in the business office, we're holding 1 administrative specialist position. On the supplies and services side, we're looking to continue to take advantage of the county's sobering center. And so we are having a savings in that area. And then we've reduced some minor contracts and the academy apartment rents, and then some special event contracts that we don't think will probably be as great just because as the year progresses, we don't anticipate that social gatherings will pick up to full speed by the end of the fiscal year. So we can take a break at this moment if you would like to talk about any of that information before the captain discusses sort of the service level impacts based on those choices. If anyone has a question.
All right, I should be on, and we'll go to the next slide.
Okay, give me a second here. There we go.
Like Lori had presented, we are holding positions, 1 captain, so that leaves 2 captains, 2 sergeants, so that leaves 18 sergeants, and 4 officer positions, which still allots a significant amount of leeway in regards to overhiring if we needed to for police officer positions, being that the academy is 24 weeks and an FTO process and other field training is approximately 6 months. The administrative specialist is out of our business office, and we had a significant level of hourlies, being significant being approximately 20 between our dispatch, records, a cadet program, that was for folks that were generally in college or otherwise younger that were interested in law enforcement. Those are all positions that we definitely miss. We definitely want to move towards, but that's what we've done on the holding positions. Next slide. Supplies and services contract reductions. We tried to tighten our belt as much as we could on supplies and services. Some of the services, such as the Sober Center that we used to have on Haley Street, we don't fund that anymore because the county has been able to have a fully functional Sober Center with other resources and community-based organizations that partner with them to give a more 365 care and compassion towards the folks that we take to the Sober Center. So when I say it's a reduction in the services, it's a contract as opposed to, I would say it's actually a plus in the services for those that need that type of assistance and giving them the support that they need to be successful in society. So it's a less money, but it's a better service. At the same time, we looked at our academy. During COVID, the academy did not run for approximately 6 to 8 months. So that gave an automatic savings of what we would normally put in the academy. In addition, we would house the recruits while they're in the academy. We have moved away from that and are finding other alternatives to try to save every last penny that we can. And when we put a recruit through the academy, there's other supplies and services that we put into them getting through the academy, which we were able to save. Again, trying to do everything that we can to do our part for the rest of the city and the rest of the departments. And that's pretty much the crux of that savings. And we still carry forward with various different special events options as we move out of COVID. We will see how that ebb and flows and how we can assess those issues. And that's it for the supplies and services. So I will turn it back over to the chief, and I'm always here to answer any questions as well.
Thank you, Captain, and thank you, Ms. Peterson, for that. And with that, I think you can see that not just this year, but certainly for the past couple of years, that it has really been, focused on reducing expenses. Obviously, COVID dealt a significant blow to the revenue stream, but we do see ourselves as a critical city partner. We know that we're a big consumer of the general fund, and we try to shepherd that responsibility appropriately. And with that, if there are any questions, any of us are happy to answer.
No questions.
Well, thank you, commissioners, and we'll wait for our brethren and sistren from the fire department.
Sisterin, I like that term. All right, let's move on to, thank you very much, Chief and Lieutenant, or Captain Royal. And
Chair, excuse me, Chair Stedman, we do have a hand raised to speak.
yeah, absolutely. And I just wanted to thank Lori Peterson for persevering through that report. And now we'll take, thank you, Lori, appreciate that. Now we'll take a public comment on this item.
Okay, Ms. Scott, I will unmute you. Oh, you're self-muted. Ms. Scott?
Oh, can you hear me now?
There we go. Sorry, we probably pushing the button at the same time.
Probably. Well, commissioners, I just went ahead and I forwarded to Miss Dane all of the history regarding the city council and motions that were passed, not only for the city to implement a retail alcohol ordinance so that the city could recoup funds. And now the funds would be a tax, and it would also make requirements, if it was deemed to complete, on all businesses so that they had certain operating standards regarding trash, regarding loitering, regarding even how you could see into the windows if police had to respond. So this is a tax that a customer would pay. This is not a tax that the business is going to be paying. And I just am really disheartened by what I am hearing, which is, it is now April of 2021. That motion was passed in January of 2017. And we are hearing basically that the city council is going to punt on this. And so, with the backup from the police department. Well, in November of 2018, the city council also had another motion, and that was to look at a CUP for all on-site alcohol licenses. So that was everything from the wine bars down in the Funk Zone to restaurants and bars on Upper State Street. If you've ever been on State Street at night, you will find people falling down drunk. And I am disappointed that we are not, again, looking at a tax that is going to be passed on to individuals that are purchasing alcohol, that we will not actually look at a deemed complete ordinance. And I think that it is reprehensible that we cannot get any information regarding the millions upon millions of dollars that our police actually cost us. And that is the general residents, not the people that are buying alcohol. We should be recouping all of that money, and you should be asking for a report as an estimate on the amount of money that the police spend on average just dealing with alcohol-related crime, which is anything from domestic violence to DUI and someone calling about someone drinking alcohol, on the sidewalk, etc. This information can be found out, and all we need is an estimate. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Carol, are there any other hands raised for public comment?
No other hands raised.
Okay, thanks, Carl. All right, there's no further comments on this issue. We'll move to agenda item number 8, which are the police and fire liaison reports. So I'll flip it over to you, John. Commissioner Peck is not here. So if you have any updates for us, now's the time.
The only thing I hadn't spoken to the chief in a bit, but have reviewed his current budget proposal for 21-22. But nothing else to report here.
Great. Thanks, John. Good to see you, by the way.
Good to see you too.
All right, let's move on to agenda item number 9, old business. Are there any questions or clarification from the commissioners? Vice Chairman? Go ahead.
Yes. So I have 2 reports. One is for the Race and Policing training, and one is the Community Formation Commission. So Race and Policing, Commissioner Diane Travis Teague and I brought this forward, and we felt that
Race and Policing?
Race and Policing training. So while our nation is experiencing a racial reckoning and various protests around the nation, around police brutality and various killings, we felt that it would be important that the commission and the commissioners were understood why communities of color and allies were having these feelings, these thoughts, the need to go out into the streets. So the commission approved a training. Commissioner Travis Teague and I met with Sergeant Hill and Graciela from HR at the city. We met twice, one via Zoom and one virtual and one on the phone. And we came to the conclusion that thinking about who the audience is, being the commission as opposed to the public, and the request from a commissioner that we use local information, it was decided that, or we recommend that the presentation be done by Chief Malekian and Sergeant Hill. Actually, Chief, can you correct me? Is it Sergeant Hill or Lieutenant Hill?
It's Lieutenant.
Lieutenant Hill. Okay, thank you. And we felt that would be, we agreed with that. Commissioner Diane Travis Teague and I agreed with that recommendation. We did think it through, and we felt that the commissioners would be more receptive to hearing some of this information. It may be new information, and for some, it's quite uncomfortable. I mean, the history of race and policing is uncomfortable, and so it would be well received from our chief and our lieutenant. Chief Malekian, would you mind sharing about your experience presenting this information? And I don't know if Lieutenant Hill is on the call, but if not, maybe you can offer his background as well.
Yeah, first, thank you for the opportunity to do this. And this is certainly, you're absolutely right. It's a sensitive subject, and it's not easy to do. Part of my career path, without sort of doing the verbal resume, is to have worked in very diverse communities. I spent 13 years as a police chief in Pasadena, which is a majority minority city and the home to the oldest African American community in Southern California. And then I had 4 years with the Justice Department as the director of the COPS office, and probably the effort that I'm the proudest of in my tenure there is the development of something called collaborative reform. And the focus of collaborative reform was to allow communities and police departments to, one, agree on what the local problems were Two, make a commitment in a public setting, much in the fashion of the truth and reconciliation efforts in other parts of the world, to say this is what we're going to do. And thirdly, to report out at regular intervals about what their progress were. I'm under no illusion that whatever we design and whatever we say is going to fix this. But I do think that the value of training and the value of these kind of presentations, both to commissioners and elected boards, internally in law enforcement agencies and to the public, is to one, acknowledge the reality of history. And I don't want to do my presentation now, but I know I worked in a city where people could remember when they weren't allowed to swim in the municipal pool. I worked in a city where people remembered where they could not walk east of a certain street after dark. And you won't find any of that written down in council resolutions or city ordinances, but the police were involved in that. And I think somehow these discussions need to make a distinction. One, they need to focus on what the role of policing has been in terms of perpetuating some of this. And two, to acknowledge the changes that have taken place in American law enforcement. It's not enough, but it is the business that I came into 48 years ago is very different than where we are today. And so all of that in a much longer, and more thorough form was what I had hoped to do in terms of talking about American policing. And then Lieutenant Hill to weigh in with a focus really on what the history is locally. What has Santa Barbara's experience been from the policing perspective, and then to hear decide what we do in terms of next steps. But please know that this department, both Lieutenant Hill and myself, with a much broader range of people, are not going to try to pretend that the things that concern communities, particularly communities of color, did not happen or are being overstated.
Thank you. And so it's our recommendation that we schedule this presentation. It could be its own agenda item, or it could be under the chief's report. But we would like to schedule it at a time when the agenda is light so that we can have a good amount of time. This would have to be done during a commission meeting as opposed to a closed session. So we'd like to have some question and answer time as well. So it's our recommendation that we schedule this on the agenda.
I'm sorry, you said, or have it embedded in the chief's update. So are you making a motion to have it placed on our agenda? That's the next item.
Yes, but I would like to schedule it at a time where we have time to really spend on this. So not when we're, updating dance permits or towing or anything, just so that we can really spend on this.
Okay, so in the next agenda item, why don't you bring that up as a motion to agendize that in the future according to the conditions that you're describing in general?
Okay.
Unless the chief, it's not your preference to have the chief include it in his update?
It's either way. I think it would actually, for record keeping, I think it would be good to have a line specifically allocated towards race and policing training.
Okay. All right, very well.
Okay.
Are there any other items for old business? Agenda item number 9.
One last item. The Community Formation Commission met yesterday following the summer Black Lives Matter protests, and as a demand from Healing Justice, the City Council voted to form a commission to research and develop recommendations on developing a civilian review board. 13 community members were appointed along with 2 alternates. The group is very diverse in age, race, gender, and specifically experience serving on boards and commissions. Yesterday was our second meeting, so we're still very much in our forming phase. We selected a chair, Gabriel Escobedo and Vice Chair Anna Zapeta. We spent the majority of the time, I think kind of orienting the group on commission procedures, and then also spent time discussing the timeline for the year-long commission, as well as the possibility of hiring a facilitator. We also received a presentation on civilian police review systems provided by Attorney Doimus. So if you're interested, I would encourage the commission to look for that video on the city website and orient yourself on that as well. It was quite interesting. Thank you, Attorney Doimus, for that presentation.
Are there any other items of old business that any of the commissioners wish to present at this time? Okay, very well. Let's move on to agenda item number 10, new business. Now, Vice Chairman, you want to enter a motion?
Yes, I'd like to
Through the chair.
move to agendize the race and policing training on a future agenda.
Okay, subject to the availability of time, you seek to be placed on an agenda that doesn't, obviously have a budget review or something more lengthy. Is that correct?
Correct.
So maybe we can get like a month's notice on that, work with the chief and Carol to make sure we can insert that, because obviously you probably want to have that sooner rather than later, correct?
I think it would be good, yes.
Okay, all right. Is there a second to that motion?
I second it.
Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, that carries unanimously, so that will go on a future agenda, Vice Chairman. We just don't know which one. So, but we'll get that figured out quickly. All right, are there any other items for new business?
I don't know if this is new business or communication, but I'm just curious, since we moved into the orange tier and groups are able to come together again, are we planning on going back to in-person meetings, or are we going to stay virtual? I don't have a preference.
That's a very good question. I'll take that, and of course our department heads can weigh in on it. But it came up at the Harbor Commission meeting last week, and basically the Harbor Commission, being another city department, is going to follow the city lead on that. So whenever the city makes that decision or moves in that direction on a policy level, then I think at least the Harbor Commission will follow. I don't know about the police or fire, but how do you feel about that, Chief?
Just to give you some idea, Chair Stedman and commissioners, next week we will, as part of the orange tier, we will be reopening the lobby 2 half days a week to allow some transaction. My understanding is, and I don't think it's been officially announced, but that the governor has at least signaled that possibly in mid-June, if everything stays where it is, that the emergency order may be lifted. I don't know that anybody has confirmed that, but I'm glad to hear that the Harbor Commission, I know the city is still exploring what their option is, and they're trying to do this in stages, which is why I brought up the issue of half days at the lobby. And we're doing the same thing. We're trying to follow the city's direction. And I suspect that when the city council goes back into in-person meetings, the commissions probably could as well.
Right, so no clear answer on that, Vice Chair.
The fire chief has been, I think, a little bit more involved in some of the COVID protocols, so he may have some better sense.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair answer. I mean, when city council and that office makes a move, I'm sure everyone else will follow, right, Chief Males?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Stedman, Commissioners Rodriguez and Allman. I can provide just a little bit more info for you. The city as a whole has assembled a team from several departments to look at not only the city doing business with the community, but also how the city conducts business within city buildings. One of the things that's really important that we look at is what we're really calling the commonalities of some of our employees. For example, does an employee have contact with the public? Do they have their own room or office with a door that can be closed? What kind of hazards do they face? Do they meet the public outside, inside, things like that? So we're really looking at the 1,000+ city employees as part of our task, but yet we're also looking at how exactly we conduct these public forum meetings. And really, Chief Malakian hit the nail on the head with what we're looking at doing is kind of setting the city council guidelines and then setting the more than really 30 commissions that we have throughout the city and coming up with, I go back to that word, some commonalities, so that we have really all the same criteria for whether the commission meets in person or whether they continue to be virtual. So, and you did bring up a very good point, and that is, all of the tiers that we've been using for the last year, purple, red, orange, et cetera. The governor has indicated that all of those tiers will be going away in June. So while right now we're using these tiers to kind of set up this reentry into the community, they're supposed to go away in June. So as an example, we have a meeting on Friday afternoon for an hour with our group to try to come up with really how to deal with this on a community-wide basis. So that was a little long, but in short, there's going to be a lot more information coming soon.
Okay.
That's great.
I
Good
would-
question. Good question, Vice Chairman.
Whatever route we choose, I would hope that we can keep some sort of hybrid version so that public can have access to public comment. Like right now, folks are calling in, and this is probably the most public comment we've had since in a year of meeting in person. So I'd like to, if we can do some sort of go-to meeting, even if we're meeting in person, so that the public can see, watch what's happening while it's happening, and then also call in.
Commissioner Rodriguez, I will bring that up at our meeting on Friday as part of kind of our long-term strategy on how we're going to best get citizens' input. And that's a great point, because it is, the fact of the matter is, the way that we've done business prior to now is in some ways way more efficient, and allowing a caller to call in to an in-person or hosted meeting would be a great way to go. So I will make sure that the committee knows that, the group knows that.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Chief. All right, any more questions or input for item number 10? Okay, let's move on to agenda item number 11. Chief Males, you're up for the budget presentation.
Good afternoon. Give me just a second here to see if I can get everything up. I'll share my screen. Let's see here, just shared my screen, but it looks like it didn't share. There it is.
Chief, I had to make you presenter. I just did.
Oh, okay. All right. Let me try again then real quick. Okay. Okay. Can you guys see that right now?
Yes.
Okay. Wonderful. All right. Chair Stedman, Commissioners Rodriguez and Allman, just quick introduction. I know I was speaking just a minute ago. Chris Males, Fire Chief, Fire Department. I too will try to make this thorough and brief. I know that I took a little bit too much time last time, and Chief Malakian maybe got shorted a little bit. So
Excuse me, Chief Males. I'm sorry. We do see your notes outline though.
okay, that's all right.
Is that all right? Okay.
Let me see here. Well, I think we'll just have to go with it.
Okay.
Not quite sure how to do that. But that's okay. Everything's fine. There's just a few notes to make sure that I cover. So no problem. This is going to be a very brief overview of the budget. As you know, we haven't presented to City Council yet. The Fire Department goes on May 5th in front of Council for a 1-hour budget presentation. So this will be just an abridged or brief overview of what's happening. We're going to concentrate on this year, which is fiscal year 21. And then again, we'll concentrate on fiscal year 22. As you know, the city adopts a 2-year budget. And so our 2-year budget will adopt as of July 2022. However, it's really important when we're talking about the COVID reductions that will be enacted, that we're only at this point being required to enact those COVID reductions for the first year. So you will see that we actually push a couple of items off of fiscal year 22 into 23, which may sound like a big deal, but in one situation, it's really just delaying an outflow of funds for 3 months. So I'll explain that. But I wanted to give a little bit of background into the fire department, just so you know. So during this presentation, though, we're going to cover the fire department organizational overview. How many firefighters are on duty? How many stations? Just very quickly, our schedule. Then we'll cover the proposed fiscal year 2022 budget, both revenues and expenditures. As you know, a balanced budget takes revenues and expenditures, and we have been hit with decreased revenues. And as with every business and most cities across America, we're not immune to that. So we have some revenue shortfalls that we'll be able to discuss. We'll talk about our expenditures, and then we'll talk about the proposed budget reductions. We got really creative, and I'm incredibly proud of my staff who was able to come up with some really, really good ideas. And I should mention that I have my business manager, Ron Lichty, is also on as a presenter. I'll try to get through the budget, but if there's any really specific questions that we need to drill down to, he is completely able to answer if I need a little bit of help. But I think we're doing okay so far. So I'll give you a little department overview first. We, as a typical fire department of our size, have an organizational chart that is fairly similar. The fire chief is at the top, and in our department oversees 3 divisions, which is the administration, operations, and prevention division. The operations, of course, is the largest division of the city of Santa Barbara, encompassing nearly 90 full-time employees. Administration is just a few employees, and prevention is just a few employees. So a lot of my time is spent overseeing operations, and operations is where the boots are on the ground. It's where the rubber meets the road. That's where our battalion chiefs, fire captains, engineers, and firefighters staff the fire stations and respond to calls for service 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Our fire prevention division handles not only fire investigations, but they handle life safety inspections, they handle permitting, they handle plan review, and they're a really, really busy, really efficient division of our department. Then we also have our administration division. That's largely the people that work in the office. Our business manager oversees those employees. And really, if you look at it, both the left, the administration, and the right, prevention, along with the fire chief, those are who occupy our administrative office building, which is accessed off of Chapala Street. So all of us in administration and all of us in prevention work in that area. And then the remainder of us really work at fire stations. So just a little bit of oversight on the operations, suppression, and aircraft rescue for the fire department. We have 8 stations. 7 stations are in the city of Santa Barbara proper, and our 8th fire station is our Station 8 at the airport. Our firefighters work a schedule that has become largely normal, especially in the Western United States. It's a schedule called 4896. Many departments are on this schedule. The firefighters come in, they work a 48-hour shift, and then they're off for 96 hours. Now, that sounds ideal, but we also run a very, very lean organization. And we have firefighters to basically fill every seat on a fire truck, but we don't typically have a large number of extra firefighters that we employ. We run a very, very lean ship, so to speak. The analogy I like to draw, which you may have heard, is if I owned a hardware store and I needed 5 employees on a daily basis, I have 5 employees. I don't have 10 employees, I have 5. And then if one calls in sick, then I'll bring one in as an extra shift and have that person work. It's very efficient, it is lean, But that's how public safety is operating these days. We don't carry a lot of FTEs or full-time employees or full-time equivalents. So each day of the week, we have a 29-person staff on duty. That consists of 1 battalion chief, 3 firefighters at each of the 7 fire stations in the city, 3 firefighters at our ARF station. And if you weren't sure of what ARF means, that stands for Aircraft Rescue Firefighting. So that is our Fire Station 8 at the airport. We house 3 firefighters on duty at a time. And then downtown at Station 1, we also have a 4-person ladder truck crew that cross-staffs our heavy rescue, our urban search and rescue unit. So the 4-person staff will either go out on the ladder truck, which they typically do, or if there was a very specialized call, such as a confined space rescue, a trench rescue, something like that, then they will take what's called our USAR heavy rescue, which is our urban search and rescue unit. So at the end of the shift, or at any given time of the day, we have 29 people on duty. And I mentioned about being lean. If we have to have a firefighter that goes off for jury duty, or who goes sick, or is out on a fire assignment, we typically replace that person with an overtime firefighter. And it actually is advantageous to us to do that, because we don't have a lot of extra employees that we may or may not need that way on a daily basis. So that's our staffing, 29 a day. And again, 1 crew is on for 48 hours, and then the other 2 shifts are off, and they just rotate. 2 days on, 4 days off, and then at the end of 6 days, all 3 shifts have worked their cycle of 2 shifts. So in 2020, what did we do? What was our call volume? We run about, in fact, it says 10,000, but I can tell you it was 10,214 calls last year in 2020. That broke down as follows. We had approximately 400 fire calls. Now, that can mean structure fire, vegetation fire, tree fire, vehicle fire, transformer fire. Basically, anything that involves fire is coded as that. And again, there's several categories, but I just lumped it in. 350 hazardous condition calls. This could be everything from a fire hydrant that's been sheared due to a traffic accident, to power lines down, to any number of things that the public deems hazardous. And the fire department typically goes out and investigates. We had over 7,000 medical calls. Right now, our medical calls are sitting somewhere between 74 and 76%. Very, very normal for a municipal fire department to have that percentage of call volume related to medical emergencies. And by the way, that includes traffic accidents, that includes rescues. For example, if we had an ocean rescue, we had somebody out in the water that needed our help, that would really come down as fall under the medical emergency. In a typical year, we conduct over 2,000 fire and life safety inspections. Those are done by both our engine companies and our fire prevention staff. That has dramatically decreased this year. And so that's going to be reflective in a revenue decrease. And then we also go on about 52 mutual aid responses a year. We did 52 last year. Now that does not include, say, responding our ladder truck to Montecito for a structure fire. That would be what's called automatic aid. 52 mutual aid responses are typically out of county to fires all across the United States. Typically we stay in California, but I've gone as far south as Orange County, and I've gone as far north as the Cascade Mountains. I was a couple years ago on a fire west of, basically in central Washington up in the Cascades. So we go all over the place, and those are mutual aid assignments. So we're going to talk about that and why that's important, because that really became a big factor in this summer's, in our deployment this summer. So we've got some key initiatives this year. I know I've spoken to you about them, but I'll just bring them back up to you. We've got some key, other than responding on a daily basis, we're running anywhere between 30 and 40 calls a shift. And again, most of them downtown and the 7 stations in the city proper. We've got some key initiatives that we want to focus on this year. And I've mentioned all of them to you, but one of them is the Standards of Cover study. And that's basically an operational deployment study that looks at what risks the fire department has. What does the city, or sorry, not the fire department, but what does the city have? What do we see? Everything from wildland urban interface to harbor to airport to interstate to railroad. What do we see and how do we need to staff for that? As I mentioned before, we're also going to be deploying a GPS-based dispatch system, going from our fixed response districts to the highly nimble and mobile resource allocation by sending our fire trucks based on GPS. This is a truly state-of-the-art system that will pinpoint the nearest fire engine closer by less than a half a second. So we've got a lot of work that we need to do in the background on that, but we hope to have that deployed probably about mid-fiscal year. We're hoping for around January 2022. And then we'll start the standards of cover study. We also are looking very seriously at the regional dispatch, which is moving our fire department dispatch from police to a centralized regional fire dispatch system. This will be a couple of years away. But as I may have mentioned, we have 7 fire dispatch centers in the county of Santa Barbara. Those are municipal fire departments plus Vandenberg Air Force Base and Los Padres National Forest. We're looking at taking all of those municipal fire departments and bringing them under the roof, under one roof, to send the closest, most appropriate resource regardless of jurisdiction. And that would mean county fire potentially running a call in the city of Santa Barbara and the city potentially running a call into Montecito. But it's the right thing to do. We really need to send the closest resource. And as I mentioned before, the community, you know, when you're in dire need of a fire truck, the color of the fire truck doesn't so much matter as how quickly they get there. So all of us work really, really well together, and that's something we're going to be looking at over the next couple of years. So let's talk a little bit next about the budget. Here's the meat and potatoes of it. So the fire department has 3 distinct funds that we tap into. As Lori mentioned in her presentation, we are a general fund department. We obtain the majority of our funding through the city's general fund. And in fact, police and fire make up about 55% of the general fund of the entire city. And that also is not atypical. It's very, very typical for a municipal fire department to have police and, or excuse me, municipal city to have police and fire have about 50% of the funding. The cornerstone of municipal government is public safety, and so we are obviously tapped into the general fund. So you'll see the numbers up there, but I wanted to specifically talk about each fund. We talked about the general fund. We also have what's called a wildland suppression fund, and that is a voter-imposed tax that is generates $293,000 of income into the city of Santa Barbara. That property tax comes from residents up in the Foothill Riviera area. And what they do is they fund a tax to have a single fire department employee who is 100% dedicated to that area of the city. So it not only funds his position, but it also funds majority of projects, including weed abatement, tree trimming, et cetera, to basically make that area as fire safe as possible. It's been in place for several years. It's continually approved by city council. And I'll tell you that it is a highly successful program, and it's very well received by the public. We also have what's called a fire equipment fund. This is while it's a small fund, right now, my goal would be to be able to dedicate some more money to this. The fire department has some very, very high cost items that we need to replace on a regular basis. For example, our urban search and rescue equipment, our hose, our turnouts, our medical equipment, our breathing apparatus, our radios are all really, really big ticket items that have a service life. So one of my goals over the next few years is to really build up that fund. Because we know how long some of these big ticket items will last, and we've got to be able to prepare for replacing them. The fire department does an outstanding job obtaining grants, and we've been highly successful in the last few years obtaining grants for our automatic external defibrillators, our self-contained breathing apparatus, our portable radios, urban search and rescue equipment. We are currently working at Homeland Security right now to obtain some new auto extrication equipment that's needed, but we really need to memorialize some of these big ticket items because we can't always rely on grants for procurement. So that's their approximate fiscal year 2022 budget, $31,546,000. So let's talk a little bit about revenues. Now, the fire department is not what I would call a revenue generating department. We don't bill for service. When you suffer a medical emergency, a traffic accident, a structure fire, you don't get a bill from the city of Santa Barbara. Again, we are a tax-based, tax-funded department, but we do have some revenues. So I don't want to get too far down in the weeds, but you can see my cursor. So I'll talk a little bit about the adopted budget for 2021, which is what we're in right now. You see airport reimbursement. This, as you know, the airport is an enterprise fund. It's self-funded, and they pay the fire department for aircraft rescue firefighting, or ARF coverage. And that is the cost of not only the station, but a percentage of the overall department. So about 1/8% of the time of the operations chief is charged to this fund because they are one of 8 stations. So we, they come under our large umbrella, so the airport will pay for a portion of that. So, but the majority of it is the actual station itself. The next line down is mutual aid. And we take a very conservative approach to the amount of mutual aid income or revenue that we receive on a yearly basis. But I mentioned earlier, there was something really interesting that happened this year. So I'm gonna run my cursor right here and you'll see that FY21 adopted, we put in for $1 million of anticipated revenue, but look what we got. $2.992 million in revenue is what came in. Now, that's not just revenue because we do have to pay our employees that are out on those fires, but there is some administrative fees and fees for apparatus, et cetera, that come into that. But we more than tripled our mutual aid coverage to the state and beyond. As you know, it was a significant fire year. But what we have seen over the last few years is around $1 million. So you'll see one over to the right that we're anticipating $1 million for FY22. And that is, we don't know what this wildland season is going to be like. So we have some fees and services. So we'll look right here at this 314 for 2021. But look what happened. What actually happened was those fees and service charges dropped significantly. Why? Because we stopped doing building inspections. Our firefighters have been largely sequestered in fire stations with very limited outside public interaction due to COVID. So our firefighters are responding to calls, and they're doing a great job in the stations, making the best of their time. A lot of drills, a lot of classes, a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes. But as far as being out of the public, we've really limited our interaction and our billing for inspections. So we've dropped that number significantly. The next line down is the AMR Fire Department reimbursement. American Medical Response is our contracted ambulance in the county. And when the contract was signed in 2005, it set aside money for all the fire departments in the county for really what's called first responder fees, or fees associated with it's not directly related to the number of calls, but it's really directly related to the number of stations, and most importantly, it's related to response times. We have an obligation in the city to get to all calls, medical calls, in under 7 minutes. And the county EMS agency oversees that, and we get an annual reimbursement from AMR for our calls. You'll see that that is ticking up over time, and that is just tied to CPI. When ambulance gets a billing rate increase, then they increase their rates or their reimbursement to us. We also have the public safety half-cent sales tax, which has been in place. And then you'll see an ICS fund rebate. This is Intercity Services Fund. This number that you're seeing in fiscal year 22 is actually really interesting. When I said that I brought our staff together and really looked to see how we can save money, one of the things that came up is that we, in the past, have been purchasing our fire apparatus really cash outright. And what the fire department does is we put about $835,000 into an apparatus replacement fund. That money is then allocated toward the purchase of fire trucks. Our fire trucks on the city last 25 years. They are frontline for 15, then they go into reserve status for 10, and then they're taken out of service. So what we came up with was a really unique purchasing plan, and it fits right now. I don't know if the long-term strategy will pay out, but what we've decided to do is, and this is with the help of Public Works and Fleet, is that we're purchasing 2 fire engines in the end of fiscal year 21 and 22, and we're purchasing them on a lease purchase program. Instead of, and by the way, fire trucks are just north of $700,000 a piece. So instead of paying, $1.4 million as soon as we purchase them, we're going to finance them over a 10-year period. Now, as you know, interest rates are really low right now, and we've been quoted sub 2% interest rate. So really, it's advantageous to us to lease purchase those. So what does this $1 million mean? What that is the money that we have put in to that apparatus replacement fund for the 2 rigs that we're purchasing is being credited back to the general fund. Instead of having to take that money right now and spend it, we're actually going to go to that lease purchase, which gives us the ability to purchase the apparatus over 10 years. So what we've really done is we pulled money out of that apparatus replacement fund and we put it back in the general fund. Just because of the efficient way that we're going to purchase these fire engines. It's really part of a pilot program, and we're going to see if it proves advantageous over the long run. You can imagine if interest rates were to shoot up to 20%, that's ridiculous. We wouldn't be financing a fire engine, but at under 2%, it's a really good way and a really financially viable way for us. So you'll see that we are anticipating, though, for fiscal year 22, we are anticipating our revenues going up, and part of that is due to that ICS rebate. So you'll see that we're anticipating revenues going up, and we're anticipating that COVID will hopefully come to a screeching halt. Our firefighters will be able to get back out and start doing the building and business inspections that they need to do. So those are our revenues. So here's our expenditures. As Lori mentioned, our budget is largely salary and benefits. We are very, very lean. 90% of our overall budget goes to salary and benefits. We have some allocated costs, of course, that, the cost of doing any business, and we have some supplies and services. So when we're asked to cut, we have very little discretionary funding that we can cut. We don't have far to go until we're talking about positions. And positions, I mentioned, we're very, very lean. So cutting positions, it either means our support staff or it means firefighters at fire stations. And that's a much bigger discussion than a fire chief or a department head can make. But I will share at the end of what we did because it was fairly creative. So really, what you'll see is adopted budget of nearly $30 million for FY21, and you'll see that our overall adopted budget is going to be $31,200,000. This number 210 represents a cost savings with an employee position that we're not going to fill, which I will explain. But I think important is that we grow our budget at about 4.18% annually. That is typically what we see, and that takes into account, firefighters' contracts, fire manager contracts, and just the general cost of doing business. Our budget increases by about 4% a year. So budget reductions and service level impacts. Again, we got a little bit creative. So we were tasked with coming up with about just south of $1.5 million in cuts. So how did we do that? One, we had a couple of positions that were vacant, and what we decided to do was continue that position vacant. I'll give you an example. We had a warehouse person that stocked our warehouse, that supplied our stations, that did our ordering. We are not going to fund that position for FY22. Again, our goal is to become as efficient as possible. So what we have done is we've partitioned out that person's duties to several people, and basically we're working to tag team what is really the logistics function. We've changed the way we order, we change how we order supplies, et cetera. Also, we have a retirement coming up in the fire prevention division, And what we're going to do is keep that position unfilled for 1 year. So our fire prevention division will be forced to become even more lean, but the goal would be to fund that position beginning FY23. We also have completely eliminated a administrative office workers position. We had deferred it or not filled it a couple of years ago. And again, we're becoming more lean. What we've done is divided up that person's duties among the existing people. And so we have elected to completely eliminate that position in our budget. And then I mentioned that we're really looking at a 1-year budget. So the next section is on the academy is really interesting. So typically we hire every 2 years. I've been on this department for 28 years and I got hired in January of 93. We ran an academy in 95, 97. We hire every 2 years. And so we typically try to run an academy just before summertime. So those firefighters come on just as summer starts and we're able to utilize them with our out-of-town deployment, et cetera. What we have done is chosen to defer the academy, and it costs about $300,000 to run an academy. What we're doing is simply kicking the can down the road. We are deferring our academy from April of 22 to after July of 22. So if we just move it out 3 months, that pushes it into the following year. And we're hoping again that revenues return and we're able to run that. And then we, again, back to the fire engine lease purchase program, we are taking $835,000 out of the contribution we would make to apparatus replacement. We are not going to allocate any dollars to apparatus replacement this next year. So what we were able to do was realize a budget savings of just under $1.5 million. So I think what you see is that we really did not have to lay off or do any live person cuts. It was really important to us that, and to the city, that we preserve the employees that we have and just really work to make them more efficient. So that's what we've done. And again, we're really hoping that revenues return. We're hoping that starting FY23, we're off and running, and hopefully we're out doing our inspections. We're doing code enforcement. We're doing plan check review, all that kind of stuff. So that's just kind of an overview of the budget. And that's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions. I did want to mention one thing. I wanted to mention that I put in a request to Commissioner Allman, and I wasn't sure where to put this in for the minutes or for the agenda, but the fire department would very much appreciate one of the fire and police commissioners to sit on a interview panel that we'll be conducting next month. So I have sent a request to Commissioner Allman, Chief Allman, for a request for a commissioner to sit on an interview panel for the position of battalion chief that we will be recruiting for or promoting for in the end of May. So I just wanted to mention that as a side note. I wasn't sure where to put it in, but Commissioner Allman has that information. So I'll take any questions.
Perfect. Hey, Chief, on the acquisition of those engines, that are just north of 700,000 that you're going to lease, right? Lease purchase.
Correct.
Can you fill me in a little bit more on how that works?
Sure.
I mean, in terms of us being more efficient in the budget.
Sure, Chair Stedman, commissioners. So again, what we typically do is we build up money in our apparatus replacement budget. At the end of 25 years, we have to replace a fire engine. Over that period of 25 years that fire engine has been in service, we have been paying into an apparatus replacement fund for 15 years. So let's say tomorrow we buy a fire engine. If this was normal times, tomorrow we buy a fire engine. As soon as we buy that fire engine, we would be putting money in to replace that fire engine immediately. And we allocate a certain amount of money every year for 15 years while it's in frontline status, and then it sits for another 10 years in reserve. But the hope is at the end of the 25-year service, we have enough money in an account to be able to purchase that fire engine. So that's the way we've been doing business. And what that does is that causes a lot of more steep ebbs and flows. We get money into our account, and then we have to buy a ladder truck that's, you know, north of $1 million. And so that really drops that account down. What we've chosen to do, and again, this is with the help of finance, public works, fleet services, et cetera, is to purchase that apparatus. And again, it would be a lease purchase. So rather than putting $700,000 down as soon as we bought that fire engine, we're going to put down about $180,000. And then we'll pay for that engine over the next 9 years. And at the end of the 10 years, we pay basically $1 and we own that fire engine outright. So instead of spreading out the time over 15 years to replace it, what we've really done is we've spent the money and we've more quickly paid off that apparatus, basically. So it works really well right now. Again, we've been quoted rates lower than 2%. So it's really advantageous for us to not have to have a large outlay of money right away, and we're able to pay for it over time at a set interest rate. The analogy, Chair Stedman, I drew when we were first looking at this was, I said, gosh, a fire engine, $700,000. That's, you know, maybe not in Santa Barbara, but that's the price of a house. And why don't we finance that over time if we can get a really low interest rate rather than spend the money cash up front? And then the city is able to hold on to that money, invest it, or use it for other emergency vehicles as needed. So the overall plan, if I was to kind of see into the future, is we'd probably like to lease purchase everything that has red lights and siren on it. All of our fire trucks, ladder trucks, battalion chief, SUVs, but probably not finance, say, a fire prevention sedan or Explorer or something like that. And we'd continue with the regular allocation. But lease purchase basically keeps more money initially in the pocket of the city, and they're able to utilize that money, and then we pay for it over time. I hope that answers your question. If not, I know Ron Lichty has been really involved in this and can probably answer more in depth.
No, I think that's a great answer. So after you've paid it off using, you know, that innovative financing, are you still allocating money to that engine for the next 15 years? Right?
No. So the hope is that we would lease purchase again, is that we would lease purchase that apparatus and another 10 years later. So that's kind of the goal. This is a fundamental change in the way we do business.
Right.
This is significant. And one thing that's really important too is that the fire department kind of daylighted this as an opportunity based on interest rates, but really what it's done is it's gotten public works, financing, everyone talking together. And actually what we're looking at doing is doing a fleet study to really look at the most cost advantageous way of purchasing our vehicles. That could potentially include, you know, police cars, you know, tree trimming trucks, et cetera. So we're going to be doing a study, and it will involve, you know, most city departments, and we'll look at the best way to purchase vehicles and to, you know, keep our apparatus safe and efficient on the roads over time.
Well, that's a great point. And I know it's, I don't want to extend this, you know, discussion, you know, and for the sake of time, but I mean, fuel, right, would also be an item that you could review. I mean, we're consuming a lot of fuel to run all of these vehicles, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Fire trucks at this point are not the most energy efficient vehicles. You know, we've seen passenger vehicles moving into the hybrid and electric. I've heard one company has produced an electric fire truck. We'll see if it stands the test of time. You know, our fire trucks are 40,000 pound apparatus, and they're not known to get good fuel economy. But you know, we're not frivolous with the way we drive. You know, we are very efficient with where we go in the city. The majority, of course, is responding to calls for service. As we're sitting here, you might have heard a siren as the fire truck went right down Chapala Street. So But it is an ongoing cost, and with the price of fuel going up, it is an issue. But I do know that the city has done a great job of looking at more fuel efficient vehicles as well as hybrids and electric vehicles.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions on the fire? I see some heads going like this. All right, good. That's dense material, so I appreciate the attention that all of you commissioners are paying to it. All right, so the chief's presentation is done. His department update is done. It's good to see you, Commissioner Travis Teague. Thanks for showing up. Are there any questions on that agenda item 11?
I just wanted to follow up on the chief's recommendation or request to have a commissioner sit on the interview panel. I don't know if that needs to go through, if that needs to be agendized, or if it's just a request through his presentation.
Well, I mean, my preference is to keep it as informal as possible. If anybody has any objection to that, we can certainly put it on the agenda and endorse it with a vote. Commissioner Allman, how do you see that unfolding?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I just got the email from the chief, so
Okay.
I don't know how that should be run, if it should be run through John, the attorney, but I think keeping it as simple as we can. I don't know.
Is there any objection to having?
It wouldn't be a big deal, but if I'm on a board, I don't know.
Yeah. Is there any objection to having Commissioner Allman be that person?
No, if we don't have to agendize it, and if you're making the motion to appoint him, I will second that motion to have him
Very
be
well.
the,
You can either do it that way. You can just do it as informed. Sorry for interrupting, Commissioner.
Okay.
Yeah, apologies for that.
You haven't thought in
I've been
right now.
quiet for the whole time. I'm like, well, you can just do it. If there's no, just have Commissioner Altman go. You don't even have to make a motion. It's fine.
Okay, perfect.
Separate.
I love that camera. I love that camera angle, John. It's like,
Yeah, it's like when I have my laptop, it comes to the bottom, so my hands look like, I'm attacking Tokyo or something. So yeah, I
Perfect.
can't help it.
perfect. So John Allman, Commissioner Allman, do you want to just follow through with Chief Mail's request and be that person?
Yes, I'll do that. I'll be happy to.
There you go, Chief.
Thank you. Wasn't sure of the process. I appreciate the guidance.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for raising that point, Vice Chairman. All right. So are there any other items on 11? How about 12? Let's move on to 12, staff communications. Now, I mean, you gave some updates on agenda item number 9, Vice Chairman. So I was kind of expecting you to do that now. Do you have anything to add?
Nope.
All right, good. Excellent. I don't have anything to add. How about you, Commissioner Travis Teague? Anything? By the way, we were updated on some of the activities by the Vice Chairman that you and she conducted with the police department and HR regarding training. So if you wanted to make any additional comments, now would be the time. You're on mute. You're still on mute. Well, I think this is a great example of why we still want to maintain that phone-in option, right, Vice Chairman? I mean, you can always just pick up the phone and call right in. But all right, well, I think you gave a very good consolidated report earlier on both items, so I appreciate that, and I'm glad, John, that you're going to take care of Chief Mails. So
You know, One
Yeah, go
thing I forgot, I believe that this was Chief Miles's first presentation officially as our fire chief. So congratulations on your first official presentation.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I
Yeah.
can be a little long-winded at times. I apologize, but hopefully I conveyed a good message from the fire service.
Yeah. Yeah.
Congratulations, Chief Mills.
Thank you. Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, good to have you aboard. All right, guys. Carol, is there any public comment out there? Anybody's hands raised?
No, we have lost our attendees, so.
Okay, perfect. Well, if there are no further communications, let's move on to item number 13. Is there a motion for adjournment? I motion that we adjourn. Is there a second? Okay, Commissioner Travis Teague seconds. All those in favor, raise your hands. Say aye. Aye. All right, motion carries. We're adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone, and staff. Thank you for a great job.